Here we are in Season 16 of Pokemon Unite. Meowscarada has been released with Metagross on the horizon, and these are the best carry Pokemon in Pokemon Unite. Not only am I going to talk about some of the best carry Pokemon in the game, I'm also going to talk about some of the best Pokemon that don't necessarily carry, but are just so incredibly valuable for your team. As always, play whatever Pokemon you like, get good at any Pokemon. There isn't a Pokemon in the game that is so devastatingly bad you can't have it on a team, but there are some that are just a bit above the rest, and that's what we're talking about today. So come along with me, Jake, your resident content cowboy, yeehaw, as we break down the best Pokemon in the game. I think a good place to start right now is to talk about EX Pokemon and two of the big roles that EX Pokemon hang out in. We're going to start with our all-rounders first, and an EX Pokemon, the legendary Zacian. If you're looking to play these legendary EX Pokemon inside of Master Rank, you're going to have to do it this season because next season they are banned from the rank mode. That is one interesting thing that is happening with these EX licenses that are currently only held by Zacian and Mewtwo and Mewtwo. Why? Yes, Mewtwo X and Y. Of course, more legendaries are coming to Pokemon Unite, and you can be assured that they will be insanely powerful and have their EX licenses. For now, back to all-rounders and back to Zacian. This Pokemon boasting basically the highest win rate out of any Pokemon for multiple weeks in a row, dropping up and down between the Mewtwo's throughout the game, but Zacian has been consistently overpowered since its release inside of Pokemon Unite. Obviously, at its start, it was so unbelievably overpowered that it broke the game, but right now, it's probably the best Pokemon inside of Pokemon Unite, especially from a carry perspective. The build with Zacian has been and is Sacred Sword Agility. Metal Claw is a cool move, but it really just doesn't do enough when Sacred Sword stuns and lowers defenses, and it's just kind of crazy the way you can rip through objectives with it. It's surprising that Metal Claw doesn't do more, but I think if they started buffing parts of Zacian, people would kind of freak out. This is the build for this Pokemon. For held items, you are forced to run the Rusted Sword, which essentially does nothing and takes away an item slot. This was their way of balancing Zacian. Okay, and the other two items are a bit of a toss-up depending on what you personally like. I'll tell you my personal preference is Scope, Lens, and Razor Claw. However, there are a few good options here. You can also slot in a muscle band, a weakness policy, a focus band, something like that. I think you could even get away with things like a cursed bangle in this spot, but in general, you want to lean into doing a ton of damage with this Pokemon. And if you're having trouble with some of your sustain, a focus band could be the way to go. While it is a Pokemon that relies heavily on its attack stat, I don't think you want to spend your time stacking with this Pokemon because Zacian is all about using its Eos energy to get an advantage inside of a fight. We'll talk more about that here in a second, but I would not run an attack weight on Zacian. For your battle item, I would recommend an eject button. I think it's incredible to get Zacian closer to some of the situations he needs to be. Full heal is also not a bad option. I see some people run X speed on this Pokemon, but with agility and the increased move speed, I like the repositioning of eject button, and you can also use it to reposition its Unite move. Learning to win with Zacian is really understanding its passive, Intrepid Sword. Once you have at least 8 Eos energy, you are able to use that stored Eos energy to empower one of your moves. You basically get a free cast of either agility or Sacred Sword, or of course one of your earlier moves if you are still a lower level. This gives you the opportunity to do an insane amount of damage inside of a fight, or reposition yourself multiple times with something like agility or quick attack. It's just such an incredible setup. You just have to understand that you need Eos energy in order to fight. Walking into a fight with 0 Eos energy on Zacian is a huge mistake, but if you have at least 8, you will have a free move, sometimes a reset on your dashes. You'll just have the opportunity to fight in such dynamic ways. You really want to make sure you have enough energy in your pocket to fight. A couple cool bits of strategy to notice is that if you hit with Sacred Sword, you are going to increase your attack speed and you're going to ignore some of your opponent's defenses when you're hitting them with your basic attacks, which makes hitting with Sacred Sword so important, which is often why people will use their boosted ability through Intrepid Sword to give you that powered up Sacred Sword because it just activates so much faster, and then you can start ripping through the enemies. Agility also has a really cool setup on its Intrepid Sword boosted, as it gives you a massive shield. It's over 20% of your HP as a shield. So there are just so many amazing reasons to have Eos Energy on Zacian. Please enter battle with full pockets. For Zacian, the emblem setup is simple: 6 white, 6 brown. There are a lot of variations of this, which I can show right here. This is a 6 white, 6 brown with 2 blue setup that I like to run. However, if you have something like this, it is very reasonable. If you are not able to make 6 white, 6 brown, you just need to decide what you'd rather prioritize, the 6 white or the 6 brown. Both of them are reasonable options. A lot of people enjoy the extra HP, but there are some who really want to focus on the extra attack. Let's keep this legendary train going as we talk about our next all-rounder on the list, and that is Mewtwo X. Mewtwo X has not been dominant as long as Zacian, but it's been an incredible force inside of Pokemon Unite since its release, really only losing some of its viability because of how good Mewtwo Y was for a little while. If you have Mewtwo X on your team, you can't pick Mewtwo Y, and vice versa. You can only have one Mewtwo out there. We're not friggin' Norse around here. When looking at strategy for Mewtwo, I think the big thought behind Mewtwo is making sure that you have that Mega Gauge powered up, and then once you have your Mega Gauge powered up, you use it to fight in a pretty impressive way. You are a lot weaker when you are not Mega, and it's a little harder to charge Mega than it used to be when this Pokemon first released. Let's talk a little bit about what build I think is best for Mewtwo X right now, even though I do think Mewtwo X has pretty incredible build variety that actually works really well. For moves, I think Psy Strike and Recover is probably the strongest setup on Mewtwo X right now. Psy Strike not only dealing a ton of sure hit damage and then knocking your opponents up, it's just kind of a crazy move. It also makes you unstoppable for a moment. You use this just as often to do damage as you do to make sure that you are not stunned and slowed down and destroyed by all of the crowd control effects inside of Pokemon Unite. It's honestly unfair that this move does this much. You know what? These Mewtwo's are a little unfair. The next move is Recover. Recover is really set up for a brawler like Mewtwo X. It gives you increased move speed, it gives you a massive shield, it lets you recover HP based on damage dealt to you, and if the enemies break your shield, it increases your Mega Gauge. You're going to want to use this when you know that you are getting up in the mix and you're actually going to be taking damage. Once you do, man, I mean, Recover is just so incredibly powerful, and it will help you get your Mega Gauge charged up. When your Mega Gauge is charged up with Mewtwo, you want to be very tactical, and I need you to listen very carefully to this. You need to press the A button. The A button is extremely powerful with Mewtwo when it has its Mega Gauge all the way up, because you're just going to do absurd damage with Mewtwo. I'm kidding. I mean a little bit. I feel like the strategy around Mewtwo is just manage not getting caught in a huge way, and then once your Mega Gauge is up, have some fun, because you're about to wreck the enemy team. As I mentioned before, there is a ton of build variety with Mewtwo X, and I think its items are really interesting because there are a lot of different ways you can go. Weakness policy kind of feels like a must. The way Mewtwo's attack increases based on its Mega Gauge increasing and then finally becoming Mega, paired with weakness policy, is just so incredibly good. An attack weight, of course, on an attack Pokemon like this is also a massive win. Things like Focus Band are great because Mewtwo brawls forever and you're going to be in the mix. The longer you can survive, especially once you get to that Mega form, the more effective you're going to be inside some of these fights. There's also room in Mewtwo's kit for items like a Cursed Bangle, a Scope Lens, a Razor Claw, a Float Stone. I think the Resonant Guard has some options with it. It's even not insane to run a Drain Crown. It's probably not what you want to do, but it's not really insane to run an item like that. In general, you want to increase this Pokemon's attack, and you can give it a little extra survivability. I think a Focus Band is probably your best bet for that. As far as a Muscle Band and Rapid Fire Scarf are concerned, these aren't terrible items necessarily, but something to know about Mewtwo X is that its attack speed is fixed when it becomes Mega, so you're not getting the full benefit of these items. For Mewtwo's emblems, much like a lot of attack-based Pokemon, I would would recommend a setup that is 6 white, 6 brown. Currently, I have on my Don't Run with Scissor build 6 white, 6 brown, 2 blue. This gives a little less HP, a little more attack, and a little extra critical hit rate, but any variation of this is totally fine. To make an emblem setup like this, you need that Ho-Oh and you need that Aerodactyl. If you have them both, you can have a 6 white, 6 brown setup. There are so many good all-rounders in the game right now, and we have 2 more coming with Metagross and Gyarados very, very soon. I'm going to highlight a few more in the all-rounder category, and then we're going to move on. First, I want to talk briefly about Buzzwole. Buzzwole is different from the other 2 all-rounders that we've talked about so far, as it's not essentially the same kind of hard carry. It feels like more of a carry that displaces the enemy extremely well. If you are high skill with Buzzwole, you are an impressive feat inside of Pokemon Unite. The build for Buzzwole is Smackdown Superpower. Some people do like to run Lunge Superpower, but I think Superpower is really hard to not run inside this game. Leech Life is fun, but dumb. Kind of like me. Ding! Buzzwole is so dominant in the laning phase of Pokemon Unite that I think it's almost criminal not to at least stack with 1 item on Buzzwole. I often am running 2 stacking items, an attack weight and an Eos cookie. But if you'd like to just run 1, I would probably recommend going with the attack weight and then looking for something else to give you a little more sustain. Other items that work out for Buzzwole are things like Weakness Policy. You're up in the mix a lot with this Pokemon, so you'll often have its max effect when you are getting into some of these bigger fights. I really do love Float Stone on this Pokemon. Before you engage in a fight, this will help you catch the enemy Pokemon in some big ways. And then things like Focus Band also work really, really well. I've also been toying around with something like a Resonant Guard on this Pokemon for its defensive item. Your laning phase is so important. You're often with an ally, and you are in the mix so much that extra shield could help you out. However, it's not a bad idea just to run full offense with this Pokemon and absolutely steamroll the competition. Early on, your strategy with Buzzwole is filling your muscle gauge and using Fell Stinger to secure wild Pokemon. It's one of the best early secure tools in the game. Then as you level up, you're going to be using Superpower and Smackdown to reposition your enemies and isolate the targets that you want to KO. Once you hit level 11, you have a massive power spike with Superpower. Once you get a full muscle gauge, it will reset the cooldown of Superpower, which means you can use Superpower even without a full muscle gauge. Grab your opponent, use Smackdown, hit them a couple times when they're flying through the air, and oftentimes you'll have your muscle gauge completely refilled and hit them with another Superpower. Superpower will then be giving you multiple shields, doing insane amounts of damage, isolating targets for huge KOs, and setting your team up for big time victories. I often find that pushing your advantage with Buzzwole is the way to go. Once you've taken down one target, jump back in there, continue fighting, use that Unite move, and just continue destroying the enemy team. Buzzwole's passive also helps with this. If you knock out an enemy player, you get a 100% increase to your move speed, and basic attack speed is increased by 50%. So again, it really is a snowball rolling downhill, just picking up everything along with it. Once you're winning, keep winning. Boy, what a great motto. Once you're winning, keep winning. Don't stop winning, kid. For battle items, it's going to be an eject button or a full heal. I like to eject button to reposition my Unite move in case I kind of mess it up a little bit or I need to chase someone further than I expected. And then for your emblems, 6 white, 6 brown. Doesn't change too much with these bulky attackers. A couple weeks ago, I would have put this next Pokemon at the top of the list, but it's kind of been nerfed a little bit, thank goodness, from its pedestal of a god tier Pokemon, and that is Mimikyu. For a little while, Mimikyu's Play Rough was one of the most broken things inside of Pokemon Unite, but actually, fortunately, it was nerfed pretty quickly, and now there are a couple good builds for Mimikyu. I think the move Shadow Sneak is a necessity because Trick Room just does not give you exactly what you want. Shadow Sneak will let you basically teleport around the map, fearing your opponents, stunning them, putting them in situations that is just horrible for them to be in while you rip them apart. This gets you into the back line of your opponents so you can take down those squishy carries like Inteleon and Delphox and Espeon, things like that. The real trick with Shadow Sneak is just understanding that its range extends in a crazy way the more structures it goes through. So the walls in Thea Sky Ruins and the tall grass increases the range of this move, and you can use this to pick off some of the squishier Pokemon on the enemy team. You can also use this to just move around the map and secure tons of wild Pokemon as well, because this move resets on a KO. It's I can't believe it's crazy. After the nerfs, I still think play rough is very viable, but its cooldown is very, very high, so you have to brawl a lot more carefully. I personally still like Shadow Claw as its move a little bit more because it's just so easy to move around the map, take away all the wild Pokemon, rip down objectives, and also pick up massive KOs. For held items, I like running an attack weight, a weakness policy, and a Razor Claw, just making sure you're doing tons of damage to your opponents. Of course, if you need more survivability, you can always swap in a Focus Band, and I have had a lot of success using the new item, the Charging Charm, on Mimikyu as well. There are times, if you don't like stacking, you could swap out that attack weight for something like a Muscle Band. You could also put in the Charging Charm in its place, but with a Pokemon like this, the more attack you can get, the better, so stacking is often a very, very good idea, especially when you're trying to carry soups hard. For the Shadow Claw build, I prefer full heal as the item, just to make sure once you get into some of these crazier moments, you're able to continue fighting. Shadow Claw does give you a huge amount of life recovery when you are fighting. The life steal on it's really, really nice. So oftentimes you just want to make sure you're able to get off your basic attacks, power up your Shadow Claw, and continue brawling, and full heal lets you do that. Shedinja Doll has some really interesting combinations with Mimikyu because you can play around its cooldowns very, very well, especially with play rough. So a lot of people do like running the doll when they're running the play rough build. That way they can use the doll, wait out the cooldown a little bit more on play rough, hit another play rough where they're invulnerable, and pick up big KOs. The emblems, once again, 6 white, 6 brown, nothing too fancy here. Finally, before we move on from all-rounders, I want to give a shout out to a couple of all-rounders that are absolutely crushing it. And this video would be too long if I just went through every all-rounder. So Blaziken is doing really, really well inside the game right now. I think it's a phenomenal choice. You don't need to stack on it, but double stacking on Blaziken is amazing. And then another Pokemon that's doing really well in the meta currently is Zarina. Zarina's had buffs the past few patches, and I think Zarina's in a great spot right now. This is a Pokemon, however, that I feel like double stacking is almost a necessity on. You just need that extra survivability and all of that attack. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Stomp, but lately, Trop Kick Triple Axle has been a really great setup. Moving on from our all-rounders, I think it's a good time to talk about our attackers. The other EX license inside of Pokemon Unite is the first Pokemon we're going to start with, Mewtwo-Y! Mewtwo-Y is an insane carry. While it's no longer necessarily the most oppressive Pokemon inside of Pokemon Unite, Mewtwo-Y is still an absolute demon to deal with inside this game. After the critical hits kind of got taken away from it, you saw its viability drop quite a bit, but that just means it went from the craziest, most broken thing of all time to pretty dang broken. So that's fun. I think the biggest change with Mewtwo-Y after the nerfs is just recognizing that Recover may no longer be the play. So whichever moveset you pick, either Future Sight or Psystrike, you're probably going to be running Teleport. Previously, Recover let you set up your Mega Gauge in an absolutely insane way, where you essentially walked into every fight already Mega. It's a lot harder to do that now with the current state of Mewtwo-Y's Recover, so I actually have been seeing a lot more players, and myself when I pick up Mewtwo-Y, play Teleport. Teleport's already solid. You get 2 dashes with it, basically like 2 eject buttons, and the first dash will make you more powerful in the fight, so it's really great for getting away from opponents or moving on in to pick up big KOs. Especially once you're Mega, you can chase down the enemies. The item setup for Mewtwo-Y is actually pretty interesting. It is Slick Spoon, which almost every special attacker is going to run, if not every single special attacker, and then Muscle Band Rapid Fire Scarf. Attack speed is not capped like it is on Mewtwo X, so you're going to want to get as much as possible on this Pokemon, which is why its emblem setup is also very unique. Your emblems from Mewtwo-Y are going to look a little like this right here. 7 red, 4 white, 2 green. This gives a little extra HP, a little extra special attack, and that all important 7 red for attack speed. There are very few Pokemon in the game that can actually take advantage of attack speed because attack speed is a whole thing, but Mewtwo-Y is one of them. Strategically, Mewtwo Y, a lot like Mewtwo X, is all about managing your Mega Gauge, making sure you're not caught by opponents, and then once you are Mega, absolutely decimating the enemies. One thing I like to do is run X attack on this Pokemon, so once I'm Mega, my attack speed is increased even further. I'm doing more damage with these autos that are absolutely devastating. And also something to notice with Mega Mewtwo X and Y, once you Mega, your Unite move is actually going to do more damage, so I like to save it for a situation where I'm already winning a fight, I'm Mega'd, and I just want to absolutely crush my opponents. There isn't too much to say about Mewtwo Y, except Mewtwo Y, and press that A button. One of the best carries in the game, for sure. Our next attacker carry is a Pokemon that got a massive glow up recently, and that is Dragapult. After receiving a slew of buffs, most specifically to Phantom Force, this Pokemon is set up to be very powerful inside the game right now and actually rival Mewtwo Y as this sort of auto attacker menace. The thing it doesn't have, of course, is this massively powerful Unite move, but Dragapult is in such an amazing position in the game right now, kind of for the first time in forever. What is this, frozen out here? For the first time in forever. No, stop. I know they'll take the video down because I sing too good. The items are going to be Muscle, Scope, Rapid Fire Scarf, or Muscle, Scope, Charging Charm. I actually love Charging Charm on this Pokemon. There are a few Pokemon that work really, really well with this new item, and these auto attackers work really well because every auto attack charges this up, so you just get increased damage all the time. One of the key strategies with Dragapult is getting its Phantom Force stacks charged up. So if you don't know how that works, when you get a KO on an opponent with Dragapult, if you are running the move Phantom Force, you will get a stack. Essentially, it's like an attack weight stack. It's not exactly the same, but it gives you 10 attack until the end of the battle. It doesn't matter if you're KO'd or anything like that. It is like you are stacking up an attack weight, but you just get it by KOing your opponents. This move giving you 10 additional attack stat and stacking up 10 times, I can't really do the math in my head, but that's possibly almost 100 extra attack, which feeds into everything you do, specifically your auto attacks. Your auto attacks will all be 100 damage more at minimum because you have 100% of your attack stat moving into even your basic attacks right here. It's not even talking about your boosteds or when you critically hit, essentially doubling every point of attack stat that you get. Not only do you stack extra attack when you get a KO, but if you get a KO, you reset your Phantom Force cooldown. Phantom Force, when used, gives you a huge boost in move speed and attack speed once you come out of it. So this is something you're going to want to use a lot in battle. The second you get that first KO, hit Phantom Force again, head right back in and keep attacking at a blazing speed. This is how you see this Pokemon wipe out the entire enemy team. And you can also use your Unite move not only for securing objectives, but for securing those all-important KOs that will give you those stacks and reset your moves. For emblems, you're looking at 6 white, 6 brown. Get that attack stat up, baby! Our next carry Pokemon that's an attacker is going to be familiar to everyone, even though it's kind of hard to see sometimes, and that is Inteleon. Did you get the joke with the camouflage and the kind of heart? It doesn't matter. Inteleon's been a menace for a few seasons now, but recently it had a nerf to its liquidation. So this is the first time where if you're very, very good with Snipe Shot, you are probably doing much better than if you're playing the liquidation build. Let's face it, liquidation was insane. It was sure hit. It dealt too much damage, probably still deals too much damage. But right now, I think Snipe Shot is probably the better play on this Pokemon. That would be Fell, Stinger, and Snipe Shot. But you've got to be good at hitting those snipes. It takes a lot of practice, but once you can pull it off, oh boy, are you doing insane damage to your opponents. Held items for Inteleon are Wise Glasses, Choice Specs, and a Slick Spoon. You just want a ton of extra damage with this Pokemon so you can secure KOs. Slick Spoon, Choice Specs, Wise Glasses, they all help you do that. Whether you're playing Snipe Shot or Liquidation, one of the biggest things with Inteleon is just the fact that all of its autos can essentially critically hit if you manage your critical counters well. And also its Unite move is one of the best Unite moves in the game, in my opinion. It basically makes you just an auto attack critical hit machine that follows around opponents and they really can't escape or do anything about it. So no matter which build you run with Inteleon, you still have this game-changing Unite move from this Pokemon. The only thing you're going to want to do is make sure you get your last hits in lane with Water Gun, which is one of the easier things to do because it's one of the best secure tools in the game. Make sure you have a critical hit counter and get ready once this Pokemon gets a little low and you will secure just about every wild Pokemon from your opponents. For emblems, you're going to be looking at something like this: 6 green, 6 black. There are a lot of variations of this, but you get it. Give yourself some extra HP if you can. Give yourself some extra special attack. That's the way to go with a setup like this. You also could play this with 7 yellow for a fun little invade strategy, although it is pretty cheesy and a little worse now that Water Gun's been nerfed. For your battle item, it's hard to beat an eject button, but there are of course a few things you could use with this Pokemon. I think X speed is really nice to chase your opponents down once you use your Unite move, but you're going to want to make sure you have something to give you some extra mobility because you are a huge target in these team fights. If they can take you out, that is so much damage being taken away from the side of your team. Our next attacker that's an amazing carry, another special attacker that can critically hit on our list, is Glaceon. Glaceon recently received a massive buff to its Ice Shard move that you unlock at level 6, giving you increased attack speed to 75%, and then at level 12, with the plus, you get the increase to 100% attack speed increase, which is just kind of nutty, but here we are. Which means the premier build for this Pokemon is Icicle Spear, Ice Shard. However, I do think Freeze Dry and Icy Wind is still very, very good. It's just, man, so hard to pass up this attack speed increase, which is super, super crazy. The items for this Pokemon are going to be Slick Spoon, Wise Glasses, and then your third item is a few different options. I like a Rapid Fire Scarf, but ever since the increased attack speed, I don't really know if you need something like that. You could, of course, run something giving you more special attack. You could run a Scope Lens, or you could even run an Energy Amplifier, making your Unite move set you up to do crazy amounts of damage to your opponents. For emblems, you'd be looking at something like this: 6 green, 7 black, 2 white. There are also some variations on this that are pretty cool that give you some extra critical hit, but something like this is very solid for Glaceon. For battle item, I really like the eject button. I think a Shedinja Doll is really cool with Icicle Spear because your spears continue to fire after you've used it, or an X speed so you can chase down some of your opponents. The combo with Glaceon is very, very basic. You Ice Shard to build up your spears, you use your spears, then you Ice Shard again right near the end to give you an extra 2 spears, and then right back into auto attacking like crazy. It's Glaceon. There are so many more attackers that are amazing carries inside the game, so I'm going to talk about a few more in depth and then highlight a few before we move on because there are just a lot of attackers to go through and so many of them are so good. But one that is still incredibly powerful even after its nerfs is Mew. Solar Beam recently got buffed, then nerfed when they realized, what were we doing actually buffing that move? And Mew's Unite move has been nerfed. But even with all of this, Mew is still just incredibly powerful, especially in the hands of a very skilled player. There's no question about it. Mew is one of the best Pokemon in the game still. It still has amazing secures. It still does amazing damage. It's able to cycle its moves. Its Unite move makes it invulnerable, on and on and on. It is one of the best Pokemon in the game, and it still has some insane secure tools in Solar Beam and Electro Ball. For items, you're going to want to run Choice Specs, Wise Glasses, and a Slick Spoon, and emblems are going to be the classic green-black setup that you're going to be seeing a lot for a lot of these special attacker Pokemon. As I said before, Mew is a very high skill Pokemon, so there's a lot that you're going to need to figure out to be very, very good with this. One of the first things you're going to need to understand is how Light Screen works and how that's going to help you secure big KOs inside of your battles. With Electro Ball and Solar Beam, if they pass through Mew's light screen, whether that light screen is out in front of it or whether it's returned and attached to its body, they're going to do increased damage and increase their area of effect. This is why you see Solar Beam hit in a much wider area than you would expect and get some crazy secures. Same thing with Electro Ball. Surf also has an increased ability through light screen where it travels a little further, but you're mostly going to be seeing Solar Beam and Electro Ball thrown through that light screen to do insane damage. And even though its Unite move Mystical Mirage has been nerfed damage-wise, it's still important to notice that this move makes you completely invincible and untargetable by enemies as long as you don't attack, and as soon as it ends, it deals damage to everyone around it, setting up big combos where you can get right next to opponents and use an Electro Ball combo to wipe them off the map. The funny thing is, Mew has so much you can say, but you really need a full in-depth guide to really get into what's going on with Mew. Just know that it's still one of the best Pokemon inside of Pokemon Unite. The next Pokemon is no stranger to being a top carry in the game, but it recently got a buff to its moveset that is not super used, and it's actually great. Alolan Ninetales is back on our list. I still think there's huge value in playing Avalanche Blizzard with this Pokemon, but the Dazzling Gleam Aurora Veil set has been buffed, and now it's actually really powerful. You now heal more based on every single boosted attack you hit within your Aurora Veil, which every single auto inside of Aurora Veil is boosted, and you have a reduction in damage when you're inside the Aurora Veil. You already did, but now that's been increased. So not only you, but your allies will be able to survive longer if they're inside your Aurora Veil. The held items for this setup are going to be the Muscle Band, Rapid Fire Scarf, and Slick Spoon. Very similar to Mewtwo. Why? You also could run an X attack for your battle item. Once you're inside your Aurora Veil, you basically just become that icicle Gatling gun, rocketing your opponents down. I guess you wouldn't be rocketing them down. I mean, it's a Gatling gun after all. A Gatling gun that fires rockets. And your emblems are also like Mewtwo Y. This is another Pokemon that takes advantage of a 7 red setup. This is pretty cool to see Alolan Ninetales actually rise to prominence with this build as well. However, if you still prefer Avalanche Blizzard, that build is awesome also. Ninetales is just doing great right now inside of this meta. There truly are so many attackers to talk about. I'm just going to give a shout out to a few of them right now before we move on. Espeon is doing really well with its stored power setup right now, boasting an actually surprisingly high win rate. Venusaur is killing it right now with Solar Beam, especially after the buffs, where now Venusaur evolves even earlier. Duraludon is an auto attacker with a dream that always seems to have a high win rate, and Cramorant, now after having its bugs completely fixed, it seems like is doing really well with its dive air slash build. There are more attackers that are all great, but those are some of the big ones in the meta right now. And Chandelure. Chandelure also got some recently really nice buffs, and Shandy is doing dandy. It's true because it rhymes. You can't lie in a rhyme. Dr. Seuss said that, but he rhymed it. Let's move on to talk about our supporters, who really aren't known for carrying inside the game as much as they are for supporting. You know, that's kind of the idea behind them. But I'm going to talk about a few of the ones that actually carry super hard, and then just a couple supporters that are crushing it in Pokemon Unite. You can't spell carry without Eldegoss. That might not be right. I don't even know if they have any letters in common, but it's irrelevant. Eldegoss is one of the best supporters in the game and one of the best carry supporters inside of Pokemon Unite. Even after the Pollen Puff nerfs, I still think you're going to want to play this move because it is incredibly powerful. However, you could either run Cotton Spore for more carry potential or Cotton Guard to help your team. I think both are excellent options on this Pokemon. My favorite held items for Eldegoss are EXP Share, which I think is just one of the most broken items in the game and perfect for a Pokemon like this, and then Muscle Band Rapid Fire Scarf with an X attack for the battle item. This makes you an absolute demon inside the lane early. You're also going to level up your ally. An Eldegoss with this setup and an EXP Share is just going to help your lane absolutely crush your opponents. For boost emblems, this is another one of the rare 7 red Pokemon that actually works really well. Some people do like the 6 green, 7 black, just so you're able to get your moves off a little faster and have a little extra special attack. I think both are totally reasonable, but I love 7 red on this Pokemon. One of the things that makes Eldegoss so incredibly powerful early on in the game is its boosted auto attack. Its boosted auto attack applies a bit of cotton fluff to your opponents for 3 seconds. Once you hit them after that's applied, you're going to be reducing their movement speed by 30% and doing extra damage. Not only can you proc this, but your allies can proc this as well. It's just so incredibly powerful, and it's so surprising how much damage Eldegoss does early. It ruins the day of Pokemon who are trying to stack or fight it in lane. Something that a lot of people might not use to carry with this Pokemon but is totally valid is using its Unite move Cotton Cloud Crash to pick up KOs that otherwise may have gotten away from you. Something to notice about this move though, not only does it do damage to enemies, it also heals allies in its radius. So if you can, you want to land on as many enemies and allies allies at the same time so that you could help win big team fights. Our next support that has big carry potential is going to be Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime got a little bit of a buff recently, and it kind of got a bit of a buff because of the item Resonant Guard. There are a few ways that you can play Mr. Mime. I think EXP Share is one of the best possible items to put on this Pokemon. However, if you're looking for full carry potential, you're probably going to want to swap that out with special attack specs. A Slick Spoon is great on this Pokemon. I think no matter what build you're running, whether you're using Confusion, Power Swap, or Psychic, I mean, all of them can benefit from a Slick Spoon, and you're going to be doing a lot of damage with this Pokemon, so that is a great option. The most burst damage possible is going to come from Confusion and Barrier. Hitting opponents into walls or your barrier is going to do the most damage possible with Confusion. However, like I said before, I still think you could run Power Swap. I still think you could run Psychic. All of it is very, very strong on Mr. Mime. It's not the Mr. Mime that we remember from our nightmares, but it's still a really solid Pokemon. Your emblems are going to look something like this: 6 green, 6 white, as best as you possibly can. You get a lot of sustain with a Pokemon like Mr. Mime. You have a lot of HP, and you're also up in the enemy's face a ton. So the extra HP you get from 6 white is very, very valuable. I think a big key to winning with Mr. Mime is understanding the value of its Unite move paired with your other moves that stun your opponents. If you're able to land a nice stun on your enemies with Confusion and then jump in with your Unite move, you've set up a huge amount of time where your enemies really can't do a ton inside of a team fight, and that gives your allies the opportunity to win that fight. So I think it's important to be aggressive with your Unite move when you have allies around so that you can set up big wins for your team. And while there are other carry builds for lots of other supporters, I'm just going to talk about a few other supporters that aren't necessarily carries, but are really incredible. Hoopa could be considered a carry on its own, let's be fair. I think you could run a similar build that you do with Eldegoss on Hoopa and have great results. Probably still playing the Hyperspace Hole just because it's such an incredible move. Trick and Shadow Ball is fun, but it doesn't seem to have as much value. And then of course, Hoopa's Unite move is out of control. Another supporter that we should talk about, I mean, I guess there are a few that we can talk about, even though they're not super crazy carry Pokemon, are going to be Clefable, Blissey, and Comfey. All these Pokemon are amazing. They don't necessarily carry, but they are the reason that your team lives through a lot of these fights. Whether you're playing Blissey with Soft Boiled, or Clefable with Moonlight, or you're playing Comfey because you're an absolute monster, all of these Pokemon put your team in a position to win in huge ways. There is a carry build for Clefable that we could talk about, but boy, it's cheesy as heck. Let's get into Clefable. Clefable's Kiss Me build is, in the words of Obi-Wan Kenobi, not the supporter that you're looking for. This Pokemon is essentially turning itself into a special attack all-rounder with crazy, crazy burst. Draining Kiss actually does a ludicrous amount of damage, and then Follow Me gives you a massive shield. You are basically using Follow Me to drag your opponents back to you, continuing to auto them until Draining Kiss is back up, and then using that to burst them down in some crazy ways. This is really not what I would want to see if Clefable was on my team, but there is no question that this build carries super, super hard. If you're looking to play carry Clefable, you would want special attack specs, a Slick Spoon, and an energy amplifier, which actually you could kind of essentially run on the other build. I would just drop the spoon probably for an EXP share. But if you're trying to carry with Draining Kiss, Follow Me, that would be the setup. And then your emblems would be green, black, or green, white, depending on what you liked a little bit more. Again, this is just, I don't know. Your team wants you to play Moonlight. I want you to play Moonlight. But I can't lie, this build does carry pretty hard. Moving on from supporters, we're going to have to talk about defenders, whose real crime inside of Pokemon Unite is not defending as much as they are just destroying everything that they come in contact with. Yes, they defend, but they defend by attacking so incredibly hard. There are so many incredible carry defenders in the game. I'm going to highlight a few for you right now, but honestly, kind of all of them are nuts. I want to highlight one that got a nice little glow up a patch or two ago, and that's Blastoise. Blastoise has been a great, solid, sort of top lane carry for a while now using its rapid spin build, but Blastoise also got a nice buff where it now evolves at level 7, just making it easier to get more damage out of this Pokemon, more bulkiness, more defenses early, and get away from any of those moments where you would be level gated before you actually hit your final evolution. Blastoise is doing better than ever because of this change. The strongest carry build is Rapid Spin Water Spout, but there are some cool variations that you can play with Blastoise, and people have a lot of fun with Surf Hydro Pump. Even Rapid Spin Hydro Pump does have some value inside the game right now. The held items that you're going to want to run are Slick Spoon, Special Attack Specs, and then your third you can kind of swap out between a few things. I think if you want to carry as hard as possible, you want the Energy Amplifier so that you can use your Unite move and then not only do crazy damage with your Unite, but then rapid spin into your opponents with increased damage and just absolutely wreck them. You also could run a Resonant Guard, which I've been loving lately. Resonant Guard Blastoise is so incredibly fun. It's proccing all the time because of how often you're up in the enemy's face, and it's so powerful in the laning phase. Your battle item is without question Eject Button. I don't think there's another item you should ever run on Blastoise. Eject Button lets you reposition your Unite move, and nothing is more important than being able to move that Unite move far enough to catch a majority of the enemy team. Your strategy is simple. Early in lane, you're using your auto attacks to do tons of damage to enemies and wild Pokemon while you're securing with a combination of your Water Gun and your Skull Bash. Once you hit level 7, you're getting super aggressive with Rapid Spin and Water Spout, knowing that as soon as you throw a Water Spout, you can move right into Rapid Spin, have that cooldown reset, and then chase opponents down. You're using your Unite move at all of the big team fights to start it off or finish it off in a huge way, and you're looking to get your level 13 before Rayquaza. The reason being is you get a massive defensive upgrade when inside of your Rapid Spin at level 13. Your emblems for Blastoise are going to be 6 green, 6 white. You could run 6 green, 7 black, but Blastoise has so much HP that it feels almost criminal not to take advantage of that with 6 white. Our next defender is another water Pokemon that carries probably a lot harder than a defender should, and that is Lapras. That's right, Lapras doesn't seem to be going anywhere inside this meta. Even after a few nerfs, Lapras still sticks around. The build right now that is the most popular is Water Pulse Ice Beam. It's funny, it was at one point Water Pulse Bubble Beam, then it was Parasong Ice Beam, now it's back to Water Pulse, but we have Ice Beam once again. Lapras really doesn't seem to go anywhere because, well, you can't seem to KO this Pokemon, so it really doesn't seem to go anywhere, while at the same time doing insane damage to your enemies. Lapras is another Pokemon that does so well in lane and can take huge advantage of a Resonant Guard. I really love running it on a Pokemon like this that's always up in the mix, giving you more big shields. You then, of course, can also and probably should be running a Slick Spoon, and if you'd like to stack, you could run Special Attack Specs. If you don't like stacking, there are a few options here. You could, of course, run EXP Share to help your allies. Lapras doesn't need an insane amount of levels, but if you're looking to carry, you might want to swap an item like that for something that's going to give you more damage potential. Other items that work really well for Lapras are things like Focus Band, Eos Cookie for even more bulk on a Pokemon like this. Like, look, you're already stacking, maybe you could stack a little bit more. Shell Bell is pretty cheesy, but honestly not an incredibly bad item for a Pokemon that already relies a lot on HP recovery and could use its cooldowns reduced a little bit. I really think Slick Spoon and Special Attack Specs are almost mandatory, and boy, that Resonant Guard is looking really good right now. For your battle item, you're probably looking at an X speed so you can keep up with your opponents, but some people do like running a potion or an eject button on a Pokemon like this. The key to winning with Lapras is understanding, first off, its Unite move has one of the lowest cooldowns in the game, and if you know how to use it, you can really devastate in battles. You want to make sure that you don't accidentally bump into enemies, that before you do that, you release that huge wave that knocks your opponents up and gives you another massive shield. After you hit an opponent with that massive wave, you're going to want to run up to them and throw down your Ice Beam. This is going to set up a huge chain of crowd control effects on your opponent. You knock them up. Once they hit the ground, they're frozen. You continue to auto attack them and hit them with Water Pulse. It's a crazy, crazy strong Unite move, and you can use it to isolate and KO so many enemy carries while at the same time making you essentially invulnerable for a little while. Let's move on to one of my favorite defenders inside the game, the Pokemon that was so bad for so long but now is so good. There are actually a couple that could fit this bill, but I'm talking about Trevenant right now. Trevenant is not only an insanely good defender, not only is it really good in lane early, but it also carries super hard with the Wood Hammer Horn Leech build. Wood Hammer is just absolutely nuts, and then Horn Leech is giving you this crazy amount of control on your opponents and incredible survivability in some of these fights. The items for Trevenant: Weakness Policy, Attack Weight, Eos Cookie. There are also a few other options that I think you could go with. You could still double stack, drop the Weakness Policy for a Resonant Guard. You could of course play EXP Share, but in this video we're talking about carrying, and oftentimes if you're carrying, you're not running EXP Share. So I think you want to lean into doing insane amounts of damage. Another item that works extremely well with this Pokemon, of course, is a Focus Band, just keeping you alive for, you know, ever. It already has a built-in Focus Band, so if you kind of don't want to double dip right there, I would say go with the Resonant Guard right now, which is just such a cool, not only kind of defensive item, but offensive and supportive for your team. It's really, really nice. Your emblems for Trevenant look a little bit like a lot of your attackers, but we're going to focus on getting as much HP as possible while not worrying about our critical hit rate, because Trevenant does not critically hit its opponents. So you're going to have the 6 white, 6 brown, 2 blue, and you're also going to have some negative crit rate. But again, that is not relevant for this Pokemon. You just want a ton of HP and a ton of attack. The cycle for winning with Trevenant is making sure that you can catch some of their squishy Pokemon with that Wood Hammer, and then using that opportunity to Horn Leech your opponents into positions that are really unfortunate for them, and then also remembering that Horn Leech gives you an incredible amount of sustain inside of your battles because it's going to heal you. Trevenant really does live forever, so you can't be scared when you're playing this Pokemon. You have to make sure you're aggressive in the enemy's face and setting up big opportunities for your team, and while you're doing that, you're going to be bonking them on the head pretty hard with your Wood Hammer. Our next defender could have been described the exact same way as I described Trevenant, and that is going to be Crustle. Crustle for so long was so bad, and now Crustle is actually so good. It's really cool to see this Pokemon in this position. I honestly like just about every build that you can put in front of me for Crustle, whether it's Rock Tomb X Scissor, Rock Tomb Stealth Rocks, if you want Shell Smash X Scissor, all of it really, really strong. If you want Tomb Rocks, I'm not against Tomb Rocks right here. There are just so many ways to play this Pokemon. I think probably the strongest carry build is going to be Shell Smash and X Scissor. The way to get the most value out of your X Scissors in this build is to run critical hit on this. So you're going to have a Scope Lens, a Razor Claw, and an Attack Weight. Now, obviously, your critical hit is still going to be relatively small, but the more X Scissors you hit, the more opportunity you have to get those critical hits. Many Pokemon can't critically hit on their moves, but Crustle still can with X Scissor, and these crits are insane. I have deleted an entire enemy Pokemon with 1 X Scissor just because I got lucky enough to hit multiple crits with it. And that was from full health, by the way. Your emblem loadout could be the classic 6 white, 6 brown. At the same time, you could switch it up a little bit so that you lean into as much extra critical hit as possible. We're getting into the realm of being very cheesy with this, but you know what? This is a very cheesy setup and it carries super hard, so by all means, go for it. With your battle item, some people like Potion, some people like X Speed. I would recommend an eject button so that you can reposition your X Scissors and pick up massive KOs that your opponents did not expect. Strategically, it's important to know that if you shove your opponents into any type of wall with X Scissor, they are stunned for a second and a half. So around the later fights in the game, if you can set yourself up to get into a sneaky position where the enemies are going to walk through one of those choke points, you can set up an instant KO for your side. It's also good to know how its Unite move works. I swear, your opponents just don't know how Crustal's Unite move works. Yes, it gives you a massive shield. Yes, it stuns opponents around you for a second. I think a lot of people don't even know that. But one of the biggest things this does is give you a damage aura and revenge damage if your opponents are hitting you. So you're stunning opponents, you're dealing damage to them in this aura around you. If they're hitting you, you're dealing extra huge pops of damage, while at the same time, you're hitting them into walls and stunning them with X Scissor. It's just incredibly powerful stuff here from Crustal. You love to see it. Before we move on from defenders, honestly, I feel like you could put so many defenders on this list. Umbreon is a crazy good defender right now, and in some ways it kind of carries. I just felt like these defenders carry a little bit harder. Mamo is another one that carry, like, defenders carry. I don't know what to tell you. Defenders carry in Unite, and a lot of them do really well. Finally, we're moving on to our last role here in Pokemon Unite, the role of a speedster. Meowscarada was just released, and we are going to talk about Meowscarada here in a moment, but first, we need to get to a couple speedsters that just seem to carry no matter what is going on. First, let's talk about everyone's favorite, and, well, let's face it, at least my favorite, Dodrio. While Dodrio feels like it is constantly countered by everything that they put into the meta, it is still an incredible carry, especially as a solo Pokemon. You can get so much done with Dodrio, whether you're playing it in the central area or even in lane. It has great secure early with its boosted attack and its peck, so you're able to get a lot of wild Pokemon stolen away from your enemies, and spending the time stacking up in lane is always really nice. There really isn't a bad moveset with Dodrio. For a little while, agility was bugged inside the game, so you saw more people bug abusing with Tri-Attack agility, but Tri-Attack agility is still really solid. However, Drill, Peck, and Jump Kick probably have more viability inside the game. The addition of Charging Charm is actually a really great item for Dodrio, just helping you burst down enemies even better. Whether you're running the agility Tri-Attack or the Drill Peck build, you're actually able to get a lot done with this new item, while at the same time still running an attack weight, I think basically a necessity on this Pokemon, and a Razor Claw. Essentially, after every move that you're using with Dodrio, you're getting kind of this free, very powerful auto attack, and Razor Claw helps out a lot with that. For your emblems, no surprise here, 6 white, 6 brown. The extra HP is nice, but you just want a lot of extra attack as well. To excel with Dodrio, I think you really need to understand that its sprint gauge is extremely important, and making sure you maintain that and using it in a fight correctly really is everything. A full sprint gauge gives you that incredible Drill Peck that shoves your opponents and does insane damage, while at the same time, your full sprint gauge gives you that long range attack with Tri-Attack that moves then into a boosted and resets your cooldowns. And that's something that I think a lot of people probably recognize if they play Dodrio, but maybe don't understand if they don't play Dodrio, which is if your sprint gauge is full and you hit with a boosted attack on Dodrio, you reduce all of your move cooldowns by 1 second, which is why you kind of see this combo with Dodrio where you'll hit a Drill Peck, you'll then Jump Kick, reposition yourself, lunge back in for a big boosted attack, then your Drill Peck and Jump Kick are backup. You sort of use your boosted attack to continue your combos. The same thing kind of happens with Tri-Attack agility, except it's a little more easy to pull off, I would say. Basically, you're Tri-Attacking from range, your sprint gauge is still full, then you immediately boost it into an enemy, you use your agility to immediately get another Tri-Attack into boosted, another Tri-Attack into boosted, and your cooldowns just keep resetting because of this. The battle item for Dodrio is going to be a full heal. You just kind of absolutely need this item if you're getting near your opponents. You have to have the ability to make sure they don't stun you and ruin your sprint gauge. Moving on to our next speedster that never seems to fall off, Zoroark. An extremely high skill Pokemon, Zoroark in the hands of a top player is an absolute thing of beauty, as seen at the World Championships for Pokemon Unite, and even after some nerfs, this thing is still just incredibly good. Night Slash and Feint Attack seem to both have some good viability, but I think Feint Attack's Shadow Claw is still the move set to go with. The held items you'd be looking at are an attack weight, an Eos Cookie, and possibly a Charging Charm. You also could put a weakness policy or a float stone inside there. There are a lot of cool options with this Pokemon, but for the most part, you are leaning into a ton of extra damage with Zoroark so that you make sure that your combos delete enemy Pokemon. Because the last thing you want with Zoroark is for something to be alive after you've done all that damage to it. You'll see a lot of players run an Eos Cookie on this Pokemon just because Zoroark is extremely squishy, and to make sure that you have time to pull off your combo fully before you're actually just KO'd by an auto attack from Inteleon or something like that, an Eos Cookie could give you the extra time you need to survive. The emblems, of course, are going to be 6 white, 6 brown. Nothing crazy about these emblems right here. As far as the strategy with Zoroark is concerned, I think one thing you're going to want to do before you really start playing this Pokemon is head into the practice area and understand how its combo works. If you start getting the hang of your feint attack combo, where it's a feint attack right into a Shadow Claw, right into a feint attack, right into a Shadow Claw, so you can set up your big feint attack finisher, you're going to understand how you can dominate with this Pokemon. Again, possibly one of the most skill-intensive Pokemon inside the game, but if you're good with Zoroark, you are an absolute menace. Phantom Menace. It's just a Star Wars reference for the sake of it. The battle item for Zoroark most likely is going to be a full heal. It's another one of those Pokemon that gets so close to enemies, and if they stop your combo, it's just too devastating. Before we move on to Meowscarada, I want to talk about one more speedster that's actually been doing pretty well after some recent buffs, and that is Absol. Absol felt like needed some buffs for a while. It wasn't terrible, but it just seemed to kind of fall out of the meta for some time inside of Pokemon Unite, and they buffed it, but they didn't bring back the Absol meta. So thank goodness we have this Absol right now. I feel like it sounds like I'm cussing every time I'm talking about Absol. Like, thank God we got this Absol. Absol right now, I think, runs with the Razor Claw, Scope Lens, and then your third item either being an attack weight, energy amplifier, or possibly a charging charm. The thing about Absol is it does so much with critical hits, and its moves critically hit, which is very, very important. Not every Pokemon that has a lot of critical hits actually has a move that does a massive critical hit. Absol is based entirely around critical hits, and with critical hits, the more attack that you have, the better. You know, essentially a critical hit is double the damage that you would normally be doing. So every point of attack is like having 2 points of attack. So that is why an attack weight on a Pokemon like this is so incredibly valuable. However, Energy Amplifier is actually really, really nuts on Absol. For its Unite move, you get, even nicer cooldowns of it, and you're able to delete your opponents very, very quickly. And you can also use this to secure objectives in a big way. I think that third slot is probably going to either be Attack Weight if you like stacking, or Energy Amp if you don't. For Absol, I like an eject button most as a battle item just so I can reposition myself in some of these crazier fights, and then you also could of course run something like a full heal. I really don't think there's a bad moveset on Absol currently. The highest win rate at the moment is going to be the Pursuit Sucker Punch build, but I really think basically any combination with Absol is great. I think Night/Psycho Cut is really, really strong, and you can just absolutely delete your opponents with it. If you are playing the high win rate build, Pursuit right now, it's important just to understand how Pursuit works. You need to make sure that you're hitting your opponents in that cone area, basically the back portion of your opponents as they're walking away from you, so that you can get massive damage and you can get resets of this move. You also, interestingly enough, can use this against wild Pokemon and objectives. You'll see that you can shred objectives like Regieleki or, one of the bot Regis using this strategy. Just make sure that you're attacking it with your opponents. You stay behind that Regi and you keep using Pursuit, and it's gone in an instant. Sucker Punch is also a really interesting move for Absol. Basically, you're going to want to use this on an opponent that you know is going to use some sort of attack, because the moment they do, you are going to teleport right behind them, you're going to stun them, and you're going to deal a ton of damage. You also could set yourself up for a nice pursuit because of that. So you're going to want to make sure if you're running Sucker Punch that you use it when you expect your opponents to use an attack. If you don't, you're going to teleport to them, but you're going to do some really weak damage, and you almost kind of set yourself up to get KO'd. Our final Pokemon that I want to talk about is going to be Meowscarada. Meowscarada released, and I think people were a little down on this Pokemon, and honestly, I think they were pretty unfair to it. Meowscarada actually was pretty dang powerful. However, without question, the Trailblaze build did not really seem to have the kind of value that it needed. Now, Trailblaze and Night Slash, as well as its early move Leafage, have all been buffed, and Flower Trick actually, like lots of buffs across the board for Meowscarada. And I think there are multiple viable builds for this Pokemon, and it's an extremely strong carry. I'm going to talk to you first about my favorite build still, and that's Double Team Flower Trick. The thing with Double Team is one of the best moves for baiting your opponents into bad fights in the entire game. Your opponents will waste Unite moves on your Double Team. Your opponents will chase it and try to KO it. Your opponents will think that you are moving in for a fight and start just even wasting their moves that have a long cooldown, and then you could set up opportunities to move in and strike. You can replace yourself with your Double Team. You can also use Flower Trick to set up moments where you get big executes on your enemies. I absolutely love this setup for Meowscarada, and again, it is still my personal favorite way to play this Pokemon. I have multiple Meow Meow videos on my channel if you want to see a more in-depth look at this Pokemon. Let's now talk about what is possibly its best build, which is Trailblaze with either Flower Trick or Night Slash. I think it's probably Trailblaze Flower Trick, but Night Slash Trailblaze is super viable right now. Trailblaze used to have a small range. Now its range is much bigger, and the shield that Trailblaze grants you is really incredible. Trailblaze also resets if you knock out an enemy player, so you set up opportunities where you're jumping into the fight with Trailblaze. It's giving you, I forgot to mention, a huge attack speed increase as well. You're giving yourself a huge shield, and then as soon as you're able to pick up a KO, Trailblaze is back, and then you're able to jump again, find another opportunity to fight, or just kind of jump right near where you are right now and give yourself another huge shield. The resets that you get between Trailblaze and Flower Trick together probably make it the best combination, but Night Slash also gives you an incredible amount of lifesteal. I think Meowscarada is kind of criminally underrated in the Unite community right now. I even think upon release it was as well. It is a super strong carry inside the game. Your items for Meowscarada are probably going to be an attack weight, weakness policy, and then something else. You could, of course, switch out a lot of different things here. Scope Lens is very strong if you're using a Trailblaze setup because you're getting tons of powerful auto attacks. Razor Claw, of course, sets up a lot of great moments because after you use a move, you are often auto attacking and dealing damage to your opponents. Attack weight's pretty self-explanatory. This is an attack-based Pokemon, and the more attack, the better. I also love things like Float Stone and Charging Charm because you spend a lot of time with Meowscarada looking for the moment to strike. Another cool thing about Float Stone with Flower Trick on this Pokemon is that you actually don't lose your Float Stone benefit when you first throw the Flower Trick on your enemy. So you can hit them with Flower Trick and actually still have the increased move speed of Float Stone until your Flower Trick does damage. There are a lot of items that work really well for this Pokemon, and they're all just essentially set up around attack. Muscle Band, another really good option for Meowscarada. So there you have it, the best solo Pokemon for Season 16 of Pokemon Unite. Will Metagross make the list? What's going to happen when Gyarados releases? I'll tell you what will happen, is I will become a Magikarp main. The most powerful Magikarp main the world has ever known. Why did it turn into crying? Thank you guys, I love you, and I will see you all next time. Let me know in the comments who you think I missed. Nerf kissing.